ladies and gentlemen. We live in a time where sharing has become so commonplace. It feels like we should always be opening up, always expressing what's on our minds. But here's something we often forget: not every moment of our suffering deserves an audience. The truth is, vulnerability is powerful, but oversharing can weaken us. It's not about pretending everything's fine or hiding who we are. It's about recognizing that not everyone is equipped to hold our struggles with care. When we indiscriminately tell people about our problems, we risk not just misunderstanding, but a deeper wound, the feeling that our pain was mishandled or dismissed. Vulnerability vs. oversharing. Vulnerability is often misunderstood. It's a word that conjures up feelings of openness, rawness, and connection. But it also evokes fear. When we hear the term, we might think of moments when we laid ourselves bare, hoping to be seen and understood, only to feel exposed or even hurt afterward. This is where the delicate balance between vulnerability and oversharing becomes critical. Though they are closely related, they are far from being the same. Vulnerability is a courageous act of emotional risk. It's when we allow ourselves to be seen in our truth, imperfections and all, by those who have earned the right to see us at our most tender. It's when we admit we don't have all the answers, when we share our struggles with trusted friends, or when we ask for help in moments of real need. But even though vulnerability opens the door to deeper connections, it's also deeply personal and intimate. It isn't something to be tossed around carelessly. Oversharing, on the other hand, often feels like vulnerability but lacks the boundaries that keep us safe emotionally. It's when we disclose too much too soon, with the wrong people or in the wrong contexts, hoping for empathy but receiving judgment, indifference, or discomfort in return. The urge to overshare can come from a place of anxiety or the need to feel understood quickly. We might overshare when we're desperate to connect, when we're hurting, or when we feel unseen. It feels like a shortcut to connection, but more often than not, it backfires. There's a fundamental difference between vulnerability and oversharing: intention and timing. Vulnerability is intentional and thoughtful. It requires us to pause, reflect, and decide who we trust with our innermost feelings. It asks us to consider the right moment and the right person before we open up. It's grounded in a sense of safety, where we know the person we're sharing with has the capacity to hold our vulnerability with care. This isn't to say we only share the good, polished parts of ourselves. Quite the opposite. It's about knowing when it's safe to share the messy parts, the parts we usually hide from the world, and knowing that the person on the receiving end will not use those moments against us. Oversharing, however, doesn't come with the same consideration. It's often reactive, driven by an immediate need to relieve emotional discomfort or feel a sense of closeness. It's sharing our story before we've fully processed it ourselves, hoping that someone else's validation or empathy will fill the gaps of our own healing. But when we overshare, especially with people who haven't earned the right to hear our story, we leave ourselves vulnerable to responses that may not nurture us. Think of the times when you shared something deeply personal with someone, and instead of feeling supported, you walked away feeling embarrassed, misunderstood, or even regretful. This is often the result of oversharing, not because our feelings weren't valid, but because the context or the audience wasn't right. We might leave conversations feeling exposed, like we gave too much of ourselves away too quickly, and what we received in return didn't honor the weight of what we shared. Oversharing can happen in any setting with friends, family, or even strangers. The digital age has blurred the lines between privacy and public sharing, where social media often encourages us to disclose personal information for the sake of likes or comments. But the more we share without thinking, the more we risk feeling disconnected. Ironically, oversharing can leave us feeling more isolated than before. When we open ourselves up too soon or too widely, we dilute the meaning of what we're sharing, turning vulnerability into a transaction rather than a true connection. The impact of oversharing can also affect our relationships. When we share too much too fast, we might overwhelm the person on the receiving end. Not everyone is equipped to handle our deepest emotions, and expecting someone to carry that weight without warning can strain the relationship. The listener may feel uncomfortable or unsure of how to respond, leaving us disappointed or hurt by their reaction. It's not always that they don't care. It's that the intensity of our disclosure caught them off guard. And when this happens repeatedly, it can erode trust and intimacy rather than build it. Vulnerability, in contrast, requires discernment. It asks us to be mindful of who we share with and why. It's not about keeping everything bottled up or never allowing ourselves to be seen. It's about recognizing that not everyone is deserving of our vulnerability. And that true connection comes from shared trust. Vulnerability invites connection, but it must be cultivated with care. It's about showing up authentically, not performing emotional exposure in the hopes of winning someone's approval or attention. When we choose to be vulnerable with the right people, we create the potential for deeper, more meaningful relationships. These are the people who won't judge us for our struggles, who will sit with us in our discomfort without rushing to fix us or offer shallow advice. They are the ones who will hold space for us, allowing us to feel heard and seen without making us feel small or ashamed. Vulnerability in these moments is a gift both to ourselves and to the person we're sharing with. Learning the difference between vulnerability and oversharing takes practice. It requires us to tune into our own needs and emotions and to recognize when we're seeking connection versus when we're simply looking for validation or relief. It's about slowing down, asking ourselves if this is the right time, the right place, and the right person to share with. And if it's not, it's okay to hold back. There's no rush to expose our hearts to those who aren't ready or capable of handling them. Vulnerability is about balance. It's about allowing ourselves to be seen, but not at the expense of our emotional well-being. It's about trusting ourselves enough to know when and with whom to share our struggles, and understanding that not every problem needs to be shared with everyone. Be protecting your energy. Protecting your energy is an act of self-preservation, one that often goes overlooked in our fast-paced world. We live in a culture that encourages us to give, share, and be available constantly, whether through work, social interactions, or even online spaces. But while being open and generous with our time and emotions can create strong connections, there's a limit to how much we can give before we begin to feel drained. Understanding how to protect your energy is about setting boundaries, knowing when to say no, and realizing that not every person or situation deserves access to your emotional reserves. At the heart of protecting your energy is the realization that you have a finite amount of it. Emotional energy, like physical energy, can be depleted when it's not managed well. When we overextend ourselves, constantly giving without taking time to replenish, we risk burnout, frustration, and emotional exhaustion. Protecting your energy isn't selfish, it's necessary for your well-being and your ability to show up fully for the people and tasks that matter most to you. The truth is, if you're constantly running on empty, you won't be able to bring your best self to anything you do. One of the biggest drains on our emotional energy comes from absorbing other people's problems or emotions. Empathy is a wonderful trait, but if we're not careful, it can turn into emotional labor that takes a toll on us. We all have that friend or family member who frequently vents or complains, and while we want to be supportive, their constant negativity can leave us feeling drained. It's important to recognize when you're taking on someone else's emotional weight and how that impacts your own mental and emotional state. Sometimes offering a listening ear is enough, but at other times, it's essential to set limits. Boundaries are key to protecting your energy. It's about knowing when to step back, when to say no, and when to distance yourself from situations or people who consistently drain you. This can be especially challenging when it comes to loved ones, as we often feel a sense of obligation to be there for them, even when it comes at a cost to ourselves. But healthy boundaries don't mean cutting people off or shutting them out. They mean establishing limits that allow you to maintain your own emotional well-being. Boundaries communicate that your time and energy are valuable, and that you cannot always be available to everyone at every moment. Saying no is another critical component of protecting your energy. Many of us are conditioned to say yes out of guilt, fear of disappointing others, or the belief that we should always be helpful. However, every time we say yes to something we don't truly want to do, we're taking time and energy away from the things that matter most to us. Learning to say no, whether it's to an extra work project, a social invitation, or even an emotionally demanding conversation, empowers us to reclaim our energy and focus it where it's needed. It's not about being selfish, it's about being intentional. In addition to setting boundaries with others, we also need to set boundaries with ourselves. This involves recognizing when we're overcommitting, when we're spreading ourselves too thin, or when we're engaging in activities that don't serve our well-being. Social media, for example, can be a huge drain on our energy. Scrolling mindlessly through posts, engaging in online arguments, or comparing ourselves to others can leave us feeling depleted without us even realizing it. Taking regular breaks from technology and setting limits on how much time we spend online can help us preserve our energy for more meaningful interactions. Another aspect of protecting your energy is understanding that not every situation requires your emotional investment. There are times when it's perfectly okay to disengage, to not get involved in drama or conflict that doesn't concern you, and to protect your peace by stepping away. This doesn't mean you don't care. It simply means that you're choosing not to invest your energy in situations that won't lead to positive outcomes. It's about being selective with your attention and emotional resources, so you can focus on what truly matters to you. Emotional energy is also closely tied to the environments we find ourselves in. Our surroundings can either uplift us or drain us, depending on the people we're with and the atmosphere we're in. If you're constantly in environments that feel chaotic, negative, or unproductive, it's likely that your energy is being sapped. Protecting your energy means being mindful of where you spend your time and who you spend it with. It's about seeking out environments that nurture you, whether that's a quiet space for reflection, a supportive circle of friends, or activities that rejuvenate you. Taking time for self-care is another essential part of protecting your energy. Self-care isn't just about bubble baths and pampering. It's about recognizing when you need rest, when you need to recharge, and when you need to step away from the demands of life to focus on your own needs. Self-care can look like setting aside time for solitude, engaging in creative activities, or simply taking a moment to breathe deeply and recenter yourself. It's about giving yourself permission to rest and replenish so you have the energy to continue moving forward. Protecting your energy is about prioritizing yourself in a world that constantly demands more. It's about acknowledging that your time, emotions, and well-being are valuable, and that you don't need to sacrifice them to meet others' expectations or demands. It's about learning to listen to your body and mind, recognizing when you're feeling drained, and taking steps to restore balance. This may mean letting go of the need to please everyone, embracing the power of saying no, or distancing yourself from toxic situations and relationships. Protecting your energy allows you to show up as your best self for both you and those you care about. When you preserve your emotional reserves, you have more to give to the people and activities that truly matter. You can approach life with greater clarity, resilience, and joy, knowing that you've taken the time to honor your own needs and safeguard your well-being. Protecting your energy is not just a one-time act, but a lifelong practice of self-respect and self-care. Personal accountability. Personal accountability is one of the most important elements of growth and self-awareness. It's about taking full ownership of our actions, decisions, and even our mistakes. Instead of pointing fingers or blaming external circumstances, personal accountability requires us to look inward, acknowledging our role in shaping our lives and the outcomes we experience. While this may seem daunting, it's actually a powerful tool for empowerment and transformation. When we take responsibility for our actions, we gain control over how we respond to challenges, and we move closer to realizing our full potential. The first step in personal accountability is recognizing that while we cannot always control what happens to us, we are in charge of how we respond. Life is unpredictable, and unexpected setbacks or difficulties will always arise. But how we choose to navigate those moments is within our control. Instead of falling into a mindset of victimhood or helplessness, personal accountability pushes us to ask, what can I do to improve the situation? Or how can I change my approach to get a better outcome? This shift in perspective empowers us to take action rather than waiting for others to fix things for us. Blaming external factors may bring temporary relief or justification for why something didn't go as planned, but it ultimately keeps us stuck. Whether it's blaming a colleague for a project's failure, a partner for relationship difficulties, or the economy for financial challenges, the more we externalize responsibility, the less we focus on our role in the situation. Personal accountability asks us to reflect on our own behaviors, decisions, and attitudes. It encourages us to ask hard questions like, did I contribute to this outcome? How could I have acted differently? What can I learn from this? This kind of reflection fosters growth, while blame keeps us stagnant. Another key aspect of personal accountability is the willingness to own our mistakes. No one is perfect, and we all make poor decisions from time to time. What separates those who grow from those who don't is the ability to admit when we're wrong. Taking responsibility for our mistakes doesn't diminish us. In fact, it shows strength and integrity. It's easy to brush off mistakes or pretend they didn't happen, but real accountability requires us to confront them head on. This might mean apologizing to someone we've wronged, correcting our course when we've made an error, or even simply acknowledging to ourselves that we could have done better. This willingness to own up to our mistakes is essential in both our personal and professional lives. In relationships, taking accountability builds trust and respect. When we admit to a mistake, we show the other person that we value the relationship enough to be honest, even when it's uncomfortable. This fosters a sense of mutual respect and strengthens the connection. In contrast, refusing to accept responsibility, whether through denial, deflection, or excuses, creates distance and erodes trust. People are more forgiving when we're upfront about our shortcomings than when we avoid accountability altogether. In the workplace, personal accountability can be the difference between mediocrity and excellence. When we take ownership of our tasks, responsibilities, and results, we become proactive rather than reactive. We anticipate potential problems and address them before they escalate. We take pride in our work and feel a sense of ownership over its quality. Even when things go wrong, personal accountability allows us to learn from those experiences and improve moving forward. Leaders and colleagues notice when someone consistently takes responsibility for their work, and this mindset is often rewarded with more trust, responsibility, and opportunities for growth. Part of being personally accountable is also understanding that we are responsible for our emotions and reactions. It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that others made us feel a certain way, angry, upset, or frustrated. But the truth is, our emotional responses are ours to manage. While someone else's actions may trigger a reaction in us, how we choose to respond emotionally is within our control. Personal accountability requires us to check in with ourselves and recognize when we're letting external circumstances dictate our inner state. When we own our emotional responses, we can work toward healthier and more constructive reactions. This level of accountability can also extend to our goals and aspirations. It's common to set big goals, whether personal or professional, but without personal accountability, it's easy to fall short. It's one thing to declare a goal like wanting to get fit, start a new business, or improve a relationship, but it's another to consistently take action toward that goal. Personal accountability means holding ourselves to the commitments we make, even when motivation fades or obstacles arise. It's about taking ownership of both the process and the outcome, whether that means celebrating success or learning from failure. This practice keeps us honest with ourselves and ensures that we're actively working toward the things that matter to us. Accountability doesn't mean beating ourselves up when things go wrong. In fact, true personal accountability is grounded in self-compassion. It's about recognizing where we fell short without harsh self-judgment and using that awareness as fuel for growth. Accountability paired with kindness toward ourselves helps us learn from our mistakes without becoming paralyzed by them. It's easy to fall into the trap of perfectionism, where we're afraid to admit our flaws for fear of what they might say about us. But personal accountability embraces imperfection as part of the human experience, seeing mistakes as opportunities for learning rather than sources of shame. Another important aspect of personal accountability is setting clear and realistic expectations for ourselves. Sometimes we set ourselves up for failure by taking on too much, or by having unrealistic expectations of what we can achieve in a given time frame. Personal accountability involves being honest with ourselves about our limits, our capacities, and our priorities. It means acknowledging when we've overcommitted and giving ourselves permission to recalibrate. This kind of honesty allows us to focus our energy on the areas where we can make the most impact and avoid spreading ourselves too thin. Personal accountability is about taking control of our lives and recognizing that we are the authors of our own story. It's easy to feel powerless in the face of challenges, but accountability reminds us that we have more influence over our lives than we often realize. By taking ownership of our choices, actions, and responses, we not only grow as individuals, but we also build stronger relationships and achieve more meaningful results in every aspect of our lives. It's not always easy, but the more we practice personal accountability, the more empowered we become to create the life we want. Building resilience. Building resilience is one of the most important aspects of navigating life's inevitable challenges. Resilience doesn't mean avoiding difficulties or pretending they don't affect us. Rather, it's the ability to recover, adapt, and grow in the face of adversity. It's the strength to keep moving forward even when circumstances feel overwhelming, and to find ways to thrive despite setbacks. Developing resilience is not about having all the answers or being impervious to pain, but about cultivating the tools and mindset needed to weather life's storms and emerge stronger on the other side. The first step in building resilience is accepting that adversity is a natural part of life. No matter how much we plan, protect, or prepare, we cannot completely shield ourselves from difficulty. Whether it's personal loss, professional challenges, or unexpected changes, hardship will come. Resilient people understand this, and rather than being paralyzed by the fear of failure or hardship, they embrace it as part of the human experience. Accepting this reality allows us to face challenges with a mindset that focuses on how to cope and move forward rather than getting stuck in frustration or resistance to what is happening. One of the core elements of resilience is adaptability. Life rarely unfolds the way we expect it to, and our ability to adjust to new circumstances is crucial for overcoming setbacks. Resilience requires flexibility, the capacity to change course when needed and to reimagine the future when plans fall apart. This doesn't mean abandoning our goals or values, but rather finding new ways to achieve them when faced with obstacles. Adaptability involves a willingness to embrace change and let go of rigid expectations. When we're flexible in our approach, we become more open to creative solutions and are better able to handle disruptions without losing sight of our broader aims. Another key component of resilience is maintaining a sense of perspective. When we're in the middle of a difficult situation, it can feel all-encompassing. It's easy to lose sight of the bigger picture and believe that the current challenge will last forever. or that it defines our entire life. However, resilient people are able to step back and recognize that most difficulties are temporary. They understand that while the pain or frustration is real, it doesn't have to dictate the future. This broader perspective allows them to focus on what they can control and to trust that they will find a way through the current struggle, even if they can't yet see how. An essential part of building resilience is fostering a strong support system. No one can do it all alone, and having trusted people to turn to during tough times is vital. Resilient individuals recognize the importance of seeking help when needed and are willing to lean on others for support. Whether it's friends, family, mentors, or colleagues, surrounding ourselves with people who uplift us can provide emotional strength, encouragement, and practical advice. Support systems not only offer comfort during difficult times, but they also remind us that we are not alone in our struggles, helping us to feel more connected and grounded when facing adversity. Resilience also involves developing emotional regulation skills. Difficult situations can trigger intense emotions like anger, sadness, or anxiety. While it's natural to feel these emotions, resilience is about learning how to manage them in healthy ways. This doesn't mean suppressing feelings or pretending everything is fine, but rather acknowledging emotions and finding productive outlets for them. Whether through journaling, talking to a trusted friend, exercising, or practicing mindfulness, resilient individuals know how to process their emotions without letting them take over. Emotional regulation helps prevent overwhelm and keeps us from making impulsive decisions in the heat of the moment, allowing for more thoughtful and effective responses to challenges. One of the most important factors in resilience is a sense of purpose. Having a clear sense of what matters most to us, whether it's family, career goals, personal values, or passions, provides an anchor during difficult times. When we're connected to a deeper purpose, we're better able to withstand hardship because we see it as part of a larger journey. Purpose gives meaning to the struggles we face and reminds us why it's worth pushing through adversity. It keeps us motivated even when the path forward isn't easy, and helps us stay focused on long-term goals rather than getting bogged down by temporary setbacks. Building resilience also requires self-compassion. Being kind to ourselves, especially when we're struggling, is essential for maintaining our emotional well-being. Often when things go wrong, we can be our own harshest critics, blaming ourselves for not handling things better or wishing we had done something differently. However, self-criticism only adds to our stress and makes it harder to recover. Resilient people practice self-compassion by acknowledging their mistakes without judgment and treating themselves with the same kindness they would offer a friend in a similar situation. This self-kindness helps them stay emotionally resilient, allowing for recovery and growth rather than getting stuck in self-doubt. Another key aspect of resilience is optimism. While it's important to be realistic about challenges, resilient individuals maintain a hopeful outlook, even when things are difficult. Optimism doesn't mean ignoring problems or pretending that everything is fine. Instead, it's about believing that things can get better and that solutions exist, even if they're not immediately visible. Optimism fuels persistence, giving us the motivation to keep going when circumstances are tough. It helps us focus on potential solutions rather than dwelling on the negatives, and encourages us to look for opportunities for growth in the midst of adversity. Resilience is also built through personal reflection and learning. Every challenge we face offers an opportunity to grow and learn. Resilient people are curious about their own experiences and take time to reflect on what they can take away from each situation. They ask themselves questions like, what did this teach me about myself? Or how can I handle this better next time? By viewing difficulties as learning experiences rather than purely negative events, they turn adversity into an opportunity for personal development. This mindset shift makes it easier to bounce back from setbacks and prepares them to handle future challenges with more confidence. Building resilience requires patience and persistence. Resilience isn't developed overnight, and recovering from setbacks often takes time. It's important to be patient with ourselves during the process and to recognize that progress can be slow. Resilient people don't give up when things don't improve immediately. They understand that resilience is a long-term endeavor. They stay committed to their goals and trust that, with time and effort, they will find a way forward. This persistence, combined with a belief in their own ability to overcome obstacles, allows them to keep pushing through challenges, even when the path forward is unclear. Resilience is about developing the inner strength and resources needed to face life's difficulties with courage and determination. It's a combination of mindset, emotional skills, and practical strategies that enable us to adapt, grow, and thrive in the face of adversity. By building resilience, we not only improve our ability to handle challenges, but we also enhance our overall well-being, fostering a sense of empowerment and confidence that allows us to navigate life's ups and downs with greater ease and grace. Selective connection. Selective connection is the conscious choice of deciding who to invest time, energy, and emotional resources in. In a world that is more connected than ever before, it might seem counterintuitive to think about limiting our connections. But as we're constantly bombarded with social media notifications, work obligations, and personal relationships, it becomes crucial to be intentional about who we allow into our inner circle. Selective connection isn't about isolating oneself or being dismissive of others. Rather, it's about creating meaningful relationships that nourish us and letting go of those that drain our energy or hinder our growth. The first step in selective connection is understanding the importance of quality over quantity in relationships. In the age of social media, where the number of followers or friends often feels like a status symbol, it's easy to forget that having a large network doesn't necessarily equate to having deep, supportive connections. Superficial interactions might offer temporary validation, but they don't provide the emotional depth and support that close, meaningful relationships do. Selective connection invites us to focus on building a smaller circle of trusted individuals who truly matter rather than scattering our energy across a vast network of acquaintances. It's about prioritizing relationships that add value, fulfillment, and a sense of belonging. Selective connection also involves paying attention to how different relationships impact our well-being. Not all connections are created equal, and some relationships can be draining rather than uplifting. This doesn't mean that every interaction with others has to be easy or conflict-free. Meaningful relationships often involve challenges and growth. However, if a relationship consistently leaves us feeling emotionally depleted, unsupported, or undervalued, it may be time to reevaluate that connection. This process requires self-awareness and reflection. By tuning in to how we feel after spending time with certain people, we can begin to discern which relationships are worth investing in and which might need to be distanced or released altogether. One of the key aspects of selective connection is setting boundaries. Boundaries are essential for maintaining healthy relationships, and they allow us to protect our emotional and mental energy. When we don't set boundaries, we may find ourselves overcommitted, overstretched, and overwhelmed by the demands of others. By being selective about the people we let into our inner circle, we create space to set clear and firm boundaries that respect our needs and priorities. Selective connection allows us to prioritize relationships where boundaries are respected and honored, while letting go of those that repeatedly push or disregard our limits. Being selective with our connections also helps us align with people who share our values and aspirations. Our relationships have a profound influence on our mindset, behavior, and outlook on life. Surrounding ourselves with individuals who encourage our growth, challenge us to think differently, and support our goals can be incredibly enriching. On the other hand, maintaining connections with people who are negative, complacent, or unsupportive can hold us back. By choosing to invest in relationships that align with our values and encourage personal development, we create an environment that fosters positivity, motivation, and success. Selective connection isn't just about distancing from negativity, it's also about actively seeking out relationships that inspire us to be our best selves. Another important element of selective connection is recognizing that relationships evolve over time. Just because someone was a significant part of our life at one stage doesn't mean they will continue to hold that role forever. As we grow and change, our needs and priorities shift, and it's natural for some relationships to fade or take on different forms. Selective connection allows us to let go of the pressure to maintain every relationship indefinitely, understanding that it's okay to outgrow connections that no longer serve us. This doesn't have to happen in a harsh or abrupt way. Sometimes relationships naturally drift apart as both parties pursue different paths. The key is to approach this process with mindfulness and intention, rather than feeling obligated to maintain every past connection out of guilt or habit. Selective connection also involves being intentional about the types of interactions we engage in. In our increasingly digital world, it's easy to fall into the trap of passive or surface-level communication, whether through quick text messages, social media likes, or brief exchanges. While these interactions have their place, they don't necessarily foster deep connection. Being selective about how we communicate allows us to prioritize meaningful face-to-face conversations or more thoughtful exchanges, rather than constantly engaging in shallow interactions that don't truly satisfy our need for connection. By focusing on quality interactions, we nurture relationships that are built on trust, understanding, and authenticity. One challenge of selective connection is the fear of missing out. In a culture that glorifies busyness and socializing, it can be difficult to say no to social invitations or to limit our interactions with certain people. However, practicing selective connection doesn't mean isolating ourselves or avoiding new opportunities for connection. It's about recognizing that our time and energy are finite and choosing to invest them in relationships that truly matter. When we make space for the right connections, we're more likely to experience fulfillment and joy in our relationships rather than spreading ourselves too thin by trying to keep up with every social obligation. It's also important to note that selective connection is not about perfection. We don't need to have perfect relationships or cut ties with anyone who doesn't meet all of our criteria. Instead, it's about being intentional in our choices and maintaining relationships that are mutually beneficial and aligned with our personal values. Selective connection requires a balance between being open to new relationships and being discerning about which ones to nurture. By practicing selective connection, we allow ourselves the freedom to connect with others in a way that feels authentic and supportive, rather than feeling pressured to maintain relationships that drain or deplete us. Selective connection can also help protect our mental and emotional health. When we're overly involved in too many relationships, we can become emotionally exhausted, trying to keep up with everyone's needs and expectations. This can lead to burnout, stress, and even resentment. By being selective about our connections, we can ensure that we have enough emotional bandwidth to show up fully for the people who matter most. This doesn't mean withdrawing from others or closing ourselves off, but rather being mindful of where we direct our energy. It's about recognizing that we can't be everything to everyone, and that's okay. Selective connection encourages us to be more present in our relationships. When we choose to invest in a smaller, more meaningful circle of connections, we can be more engaged and attentive in those relationships. We can offer our time, energy, and support more fully, knowing that these are the people who truly matter in our lives. This presence deepens our connections and fosters a sense of closeness and understanding that can't be achieved through surface-level interaction. Selective connection helps us build relationships that are fulfilling, authentic, and based on mutual respect and care. Practicing selective connection allows us to cultivate relationships that nourish us emotionally, mentally, and even spiritually. It's about being thoughtful and intentional in who we allow into our inner circle and prioritizing those relationships that bring joy, support, and growth into our lives. By being selective with our connections, we honor our own needs and values, creating space for deeper, more fulfilling relationships while letting go of those that no longer serve us.